Wait, what were you doing there, Greg?
Are
you saying that Trump was a robot?
I can't wait for the day that Trump dies so I can stop listening to people like Greg go on and on and on.
I'm sorry, he was a really bad person.
He was a guy that was a president for 15 minutes. In the history of things, he's a blink of an eye. He's only got the power you give him.
I disagree.
The scandals will outlive his time as president, of course. Just like they did with Ulysses S. Grant. You know, he was only in for
Richard Nixon, who was a nice guy and didn't act like an idiot.
No, I'm saying he was a terrible president, but he at least had I'm going to get on national TV and not talk about how I hate Mexicans.
Welcome to another episode of the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker on the September 28th, 2022. Here we are, so close to October, and yet so far. Our client for today is Generation Whatevrer, which means we'll be talking about all of you in some form or another, at least in giant generalities.
Behold, trapped in a hellscape of their own invention, socially unaware old white men bound by the pretense of being fake lawyers yet knowing no law, no exquisite Latin terminology, they are inexplicably compelled to quibble over minutia, squabble over triflings, and bicker like those who value their backyards far too highly without even knowing the difference between an easement and an alleyway. At this very moment, you have entered the heart of the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. Let's get started.
Coming this fall to a B-level free streaming service near you. You know, the one you just found out about, Tubi, Bluto, Bruno, whatever. That's right, a new breakthrough network that is bringing the best of the worst of what YouTube and TikTok have to offer. Served up to you in needlessly episodic shows that no one should watch, but you do. That's right, strap your helmet on and get ready for Tourette's TV. Yes, the sick fucks at Tourette's TV have tirelessly curated some of the internet's best offerings and hidden gems of attention-seeking children pretending to have actual disorders and mental health issues for the sake of likes and follows. You thought it was just a one-off video that appeared on your YouTube homepage. Not so fast, dipshit. There is literally an army of these perverse bloggers and talkers creating an entire world of alters and endless videos of tasks I have to do when my tics are bad. Now you don't have to go looking. It's all right there on Tourette's TV. Check your favorite subreddit or Discord server to discover where you can tune in. Tourette's TV. Binge the cringe.
Well, Tourette's TV.
Is there an hour-long show on this streaming service of just cute kittens? But they give it some plot.
It's at midnight. After all of the kids get done telling you about the 13 different personalities, it's just straight kitten videos.
Calm you down so you can go to sleep.
Yeah.
It seems like, good. Greg, you're kind of on a kitten thing today. This is the second time you've brought up
like cute kittens. Who doesn't like cute kittens? Looking at videos of cute kittens.
Well, it's fine for you to like them. I'm just wondering if there's something that you saw recently that caused it to come to the forefront of your mind.
Can we talk
I haven't seen a cute kitten in a long time. Strangely enough.
Oh. So this is like a yearning.
I haven't seen a cute kitten in much longer than I'm used to.
Yeah, I guess I'm yearning for a cute kitten very bad.
You've got desires to see cute kittens.
Yes, I'm missing seeing cute kittens, so I wish there was a TV show.
Okay. Well, we were at 24 people watching the live stream on TikTok, and now we're down to 1.
The Chinese
Thanks,
government.
Brendan.
They can't hear me.
Oh no! Now they're all gone. We even lost the one.
Oh, thanks me.
It's not you guys though. It's all me. That's the thing.
Oh yeah, forget. Because there was silence for 2 minutes. Of course they left.
I muted myself with you guys, and I was talking to them to let them know what was happening on the YouTube channel, but it didn't translate in anybody coming to YouTube to watch us. So again, anybody on TikTok, if you're interested, one person, we're at the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker.
Did you guys ever accidentally turn on your deaf, or is it the blind thing on your TV, on your cable or streaming, where a voice comes on and it describes everything in the TV show? It's like the woman walks down the hallway while you're watching a TV show. And are you doing that on TikTok? Like Brendan is now talking about a fake streaming service. You have to describe it to them.
Well, I was just saying that we had a fake sponsor that I was letting them know
Greg
that that's
is chain
what was
smoking
actually happening
and
at this
drinking
moment.
bourbon and giving Brendan shit about his thing.
His thing. He's giving shit about his thing.
Hey, leave my thing out of this.
Eventually, Greg always talks about your thing. All right, well, let's discuss our client for today. Our client for today is Generation Whatevrer. And
Whatever.
that it was kind of an interesting little rabbit hole that I wound up walking into to do some research on this subject. So most people are familiar with baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, but they're not quite so familiar with what came before boomers and what comes after millennials.
The flappers, the jazz age,
The
flappers.
Jazz age wouldn't be a generation, though, Greg.
Before the boomers, it was the greatest generation, and before
not really. There was actually a generation in between the greatest generation and the boomers.
I thought the greatest generation came home from World War II and fucked their wives and had the baby boomers. So how could you squeeze a generation in there?
It's a generation is generally about 15 years, right?
Yeah.
So you can definitely squeeze a generation of the people who were like born in the period but weren't old enough to go to war.
Right.
Right? So that would be a different generation that would be, and that was the silent generation.
The silent generation. That's
Right.
what. Yeah.
Yes.
Were they mute? They were all mutes.
They were basically treated like they were like nobody paid attention to them.
They were the Gen X. They were the Gen X of back then.
Kind of. They're like the Gen X of their time.
But that's an amazing generation when you think about it, because you didn't have to fight in the war. You were probably too young to go through the Depression, but you got all the amazing benefits of post-war America, like amazing economy, jobs were just being given out like candy.
Generation
like
X,
these kids
like the 80s. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, jobs were so plentiful in the 80s. I'm sorry, I didn't feel that way.
And then the generation just
50s?
before the greatest generation was the lost generation.
I've heard that was just a handful of writers like Fancy Pants, like Scott Fitzgerald. It wasn't like many people. It wasn't like most of the country was.
Well, no, it was the generation. It's a generation, Greg. That's why they said generation, because
I've
it's
always
like
heard
that
lost
category.
Just referring to those like expatriate artists, writers who went to France, and that's the lost generation, as far as I know.
Well, here's the thing, though, Greg. It's like any generation category is not going to hit everybody in terms of characteristics.
No, obviously.
It's done to generalize a group of people.
So, what would you say?
Basically, marketing purposes.
In your research, what is the lost generation? What were they about?
I'm glad you asked, Greg. The lost generation.
I feel Greg is getting needlessly aggressive about his
I'm angry about this. But did they not have maps? Did they get lost all the time trying to find places?
Yeah. They didn't have
In a
maps,
more general sense, the lost generation is considered to be made up of individuals born between 1883 and 1900. In the wake of the Industrial Revolution, Western members of the lost generation grew up in societies which are more literate, consumerist, and media saturated than ever before, but which also tended to maintain strictly conservative social values. Young men of that cohort were mobilized on a mass scale for the First World War, a conflict which was often seen as the defining moment of their age group's lifespan.
So they came to age before the First World War, you're saying?
They came to age in time to be part of the First World War.
They served in the First World War. That was
right.
Oh yeah, 1900 they were born, so they'd be 19 or.
Yeah, so I've got a whole list of when these generations allegedly took place. So let's start with Lost Generation. It's supposed to be 1883 to 1900. Okay. The Greatest Generation, which was also called the GI Generation for a government issue, was 1901 to 1924. Then there was the Silent Generation, which was 1925 1942. Then the Boomers, and I disagree with this particular age bracket that they gave here, which is 1943 to 60, because I've seen lots of places where boomers go to like 1963 or 64. I mean, it's not a major difference, but still.
No, 63 is Generation X.
Gen X is 1961 to 1981, according to this. Then there's millennials, which they were once called Generation Y, but millennial kind of surpassed that as a term to use for calling them. So I think people wanted to be Gen Y, but now the interesting thing is the generation after millennials is known as Gen Z, right?
Right. It's because the Y guys They didn't want to be Y because then they were just what came after X. So they were like, no, we're millennials. And then the Z kids are mostly our kids. So they were just like, yep, I'm a Z.
Yeah,
So
the
let
weird
me-
thing about us is that Gen X, I don't think we were picked. I don't think the X was picked for the letter purpose, right?
No, it
So
was
that's why it
unknown.
makes more sense for them not to have generation blank, to be the name of the next generation. I think millennials is a more apt term for it,
Mhm.
you know. But the interesting thing is
Sure.
that this thing I was looking up, they were trying to call Gen Z homelanders,
Oh God, no.
which I
From the
thought
boys?
That's a
no,
terrible idea.
before that was in existence. But
But
Why
why?
Homelander? What's
Why?
the
Why would that?
what's
like
the etymology of that word, or etymology? Sorry, not insects. What's the etymology of that word?
well, according to this organization who developed this particular statement of the Homeland Generation, they comprise the oldest Americans who will never recall any year of prosperity before the catastrophic global financial meltdown of 2008, nor any national leader before the election of America's first African American president. As post 9/11 infants growing up in the shadow of America's Asian wars and the new U.S. Department of Homeland Security, they mostly believe that the purpose of government is to, quote, keep us safe, unquote. They're carefully raised by hands-on Gen X parents who don't dare let their own kids take the same risks they themselves took.
True.
Homelanders literally spent more time at home with their multiple digital platforms than any earlier child generation in history. This was written in like 2016.
Isn't an
Elementary
important
schools are
part of that,
introducing.
though?
What was that,
Also,
Greg?
an important part of that, though, is the internet. That changed everything. Like kids who grew up before the internet, kids who grew up after. So millennials kind
Mostly
of
the internet.
right?
They're kind of in the middle,
Early
but
internet?
mostly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the millennials, they was when they were born. They were born. Let me go back to this thing.
Late 80s.
So like 1982 to 2004.
82
So.
even. Huh.
Yeah. They're not as young as you think. A lot of the people I think we go, oh, millennial is
It's like
actually
they came of
probably,
age during the millennials. So if they're born in 82, they would be
They were 18 in
18 years old when
So
the
by
millennium
they had
hit.
early internet when they were teenagers. So I guess
Mhm.
Right.
most of their life they've had the internet.
But not
Yeah,
like,
so the internet, we became really, I mean, I remember the internet came around. I was, I was in my early 20s when that happened. So that was back in the early 90s, mid 90s, when the internet started becoming more prevalent and became more of a thing,
Can I
That's when
just
everybody
add a little
then had to
story
have
in
a computer. What's that?
I
I
built
just
my
want to add
first
a
website
story
in 97.
about what a
Okay.
weirdo I am. Is like we're roughly the same age. I didn't even know. Like everyone was talking about the internet. Everyone had it. I knew. Everyone was like, "Oh, I sent an email." I never even saw the internet until like 10 years. It was a long time after
Until the
everyone had had it.
2000s?
Maybe late
Yeah.
90s, 2000s. My friend gave me a computer, gave me his account,
Yeah.
and I was just like, God, I can't believe all this porn I've been missing. That's all I was excited about. I couldn't believe, and it wasn't even videos. It was
Well,
just
then you
like
would've
pictures of
hated-
hot girls.
You would have hated the early internet because you would just sit there and just wait for it to like,
I heard about that. Yeah,
you're like,
Yes,
"God."
when lightning speed modems were taking an hour to download one photograph of anything.
but I would also I was amazed at every nerdy thing I've ever loved. Like I could just look up a huge thing about oh, Mad Max. Oh, the car in Mad Max was blah blah blah, and a Ford Falcon. And I remember, oh my God, this is what I dreamed of my whole life. I was always buying fanzines and magazines. I couldn't afford many, just to get little articles about my nerdy interests, and it was all there. And it took me so long just because I was too cheap to buy a computer, and it blew me away. It changed the way, like we all know, the internet.
Well,
changed.
personal computers were pretty expensive back then too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they weren't
they weren't cheap for sure. But yeah, I mean, I got into it early on. It was amazing. I was at a thing for Google, and this today, just like a virtual product announcement thing. But man, what's happening with their phone and integrating search and making this whole experience?
So
It's
would you
pretty
guys
wild.
say that Gen Z,
Compared to what it was when you were like,
are we calling post millennials Gen Z then? That's the main term for that one after millennials, the generation.
now?
So Gen Z is, you could also define, they don't even know what the world's like without the internet. They don't know what that's like. right?
I heard in marketing circles try to stick them with the I generation.
Right. I was with a small letter I
Small
Yeah.
in front
letter
of
I
generation. Right.
generation.
That was an attempt to do that because they were also considered the me generation as well. Like it's all about me and they're like heavily entitled and that type of thing was like one of the concepts that was supposed to be behind that, which obviously fits for a certain group of people. But I think it's also how generations are portrayed by the media too, which gets them stuck with these monikers. I mean, the fact is, all the generation stuff is mainly bullshit, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, no, I don't think it's total bullshit. I think that exists because people like me that are marketers can see that there are patterns of behaviors and values and things that are different. Obviously,
marketers are all about bullshit.
but yeah, it's not bullshit because if I want to market to senior citizens, I'm not going to do the same thing if I'm going to market to 30-year-olds. You know what I mean? I have clients where, the ratio of diverse pictures on their website is way more important than probably it should be. But that's that public, that's a generation. And then there's another generation that doesn't have those same things. So it's not total bullshit. What you call them and what that means in the psychobabble, a lot of that is bullshit, but
But times do influence people. So yeah, obviously,
Sure.
the greatest generation, they fought World War II. They were definitely different than Generation X, who were just like, I don't want to be bothered. Leave me alone.
Right. Well, Generation X is, of course, our claim to fame, if anything, in terms of societal changes, is divorce became commonplace. So most Gen Xers were in broken homes. That was where you had latchkey kids, and that whole thing started really in the.
Well, that was kind of the term of Gen X before Gen X became the name. It was the latchkey generation. It was kind of what we were being. I mean, I wasn't a latchkey kid. I was fortunate because only one of my parents worked. The other one was generally home whenever I got
It's
home.
kind of weird, though, that it became a thing when that guy Douglas Copeland wrote that book, Generation X, about grunge kids. But that was a band in 1978. Nobody cared about when the band in England, who were very popular, had a name called Generation X. It wasn't like, hey, this is a great name for a generation of kids. But then 10 years later, so maybe 10 years, a little later.
Well, let's be honest.
Douglas Copeland wrote that book.
Gen X is a way cooler moniker for the generation than latchkey kids. That sounds like the Little Rascals. Man, we just had our keys. That's why I think these generations, they're Y or they're Z until that really you kind of figure out what it means. I mean, you think of like kids that are Generation Z now, how much the pandemic has meant to them, whether they were not allowed to graduate high school, they had to go to homeschool, or people with masks. I mean, the last 2 years of the pandemic has to have a huge impact on little guys.
Do you think also growing up with Trump as a president, that must change your worldview? Like a president can be like this? That's what a president is?
Right.
That's a huge thing. Like it was a huge, what do they call it? Paradigm shift. They're just like, oh, this is a thing that can happen.
Well, when we were kids, it was Nixon. I remember the first.
I know, but Nixon still had demeanor.
What are you talking?
No, he was an asshole.
No, the thing for us was Reagan, because Reagan was an actor who became president. That's a
whole, but that's a different TV.
Reagan and Nixon didn't go on TV and go like fucking like a Tourette's patient,
Wait, what were you doing there, Greg?
I don't know. Can we clip that?
Are you saying that Trump was a robot?
No, once Trump did this thing, once Trump was in a speech, and he was probably trying to do that bada bing, bada bing.
I can't wait for the day that Trump dies so I can stop listening to people like Greg go on and on and on.
I'm sorry, he was a really bad person.
He was a guy that was a president for 15 minutes in the history of things. He's a blink of an eye. He's only got the power you give him. I
disagree.
About him.
Well, the scandals will outlive his time as president, of course. Just like they did with Ulysses S. Grant. He was only in for
Richard Nixon, who was a nice guy and didn't act like an idiot.
No, I'm saying he was a terrible president, but he at least had I'm going to get on national TV and not talk about how I hate Mexicans. And,
but arguably, Nixon was way worse.
Him by the pussy and shit.
But Nixon was way worse because he was smarter than that. He was able to do a lot
yes.
worse.
He's a horrible president.
He had people believing him. There was no, I mean,
but I'm saying we didn't know until Watergate tapes about like what a horrible racist he was and how horrible he was. It was just like, it's like Trump just put it all out there. He was just honest about it. Like, I'm a fucking moron. I'm a hateful moron.
Wait, no, he was never honest about being a moron, Greg.
Trump?
Yes, he never.
He
He would
should.
never
Every
say
time
that
we
he
watch-
was stupid.
No,
Why
he
are we
didn't say
talking
that,
about
but
Trump?
he was.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
wait, does this
Guys.
bother? Am I saying untruths? Is like
No,
this
I'm
like,
just saying
you're
we're talking about generations and you're just off on like some
I think this is a
weirdo
big thing. I think
Tourette's syndrome,
kids
Tourette's
growing
TV, ladies and gentlemen. Tune
I think
into
kids growing
Tourette's
up-
News with
It's-
kids
Greg.
growing up in a
Trump's
world where
TV.
the president of the United States could be worse than the hobo down the street, like worse than anyone you know.
During this
It's like-
show, Greg will just
it's a big thing.
continually repeat the same sort of thing about how bad Trump is.
No, because you're
over
saying
and
about
over again.
Tourette, you're saying it has nothing to do with generational. I'm saying that could be a big thing for kids who grew up with Trump as their first president they remember.
okay, let me get
Major, like
okay,
thing.
hold on. Shh. Listen, smoke your cigarette for just a second and inhale.
I guess
So
so.
that's true. That's true, but it's divisive of both sides. I don't think it's definitive of the generation because the generation contains people who grew up in households that don't think like you do, Greg, who think Trump was a great guy. Just like there's a bunch of people that think he's, the Antichrist. But what I'm saying is the pandemic affected all of those people equally, whether they believed in Trump or didn't believe in Trump. They may have manifested in different ways, but they all went through some common thing.
Yeah.
World War II was like that. World War II was something everyone did, regardless of what church they went to or what party they voted for. They went and they got shot at and they watched people die. That defined that group. So that's why I'm saying I don't think Trump is as important.
No, it's not as much as World War II. It's not as much as the pandemic because that did influence everyone, depending whatever your political stripe was. But I even think kids who grew up in Republican households who loved Trump, even that was an effect, like maybe a different way. Like, wow, this guy's finally saying all these things we wanted to hear. I mean, that was probably a big thing for them. Like,
it's
wow.
just the continued radicalization of the people. Just keep them apart.
But
keep the poor people from getting together. Keep them over here.
Nixon did definitely define a generation. Like basically, Watergate made Generation X kids be like, "Fuck, this is all bullshit. They're all corrupt. We fuck politics. They're all those guys are."
Yeah, but how much were we really affected by Nixon? I mean, the fact is that you guys were younger than I was when Nixon was in power.
But I remember reading about it a lot, like even when I was like 13.
But everyone could read about it, even now, and be affected by it in some way.
We knew that, like, wow, the government just is really.
Well,
the president can be really corrupt. So
but it doesn't have to do with how old you are because you're a part of an overall environment. So if your parents lived through it and the values that they give to you, the things they tell you, whether you understood that Nixon did whatever, this was me.
Yeah.
But my mom, like I remember watching him on TV and going, God, this is a weird guy. And it interrupted whatever the dumb show I was watching. I don't even remember. I just remember, who's this? And my mom said, oh, he's a criminal. He's the president. And I went,
he's a criminal. He's the president.
Right. And I was probably, I don't know, whatever I was, six.
Yeah, so that influenced you. You were like, wow, a president could be a criminal.
Right. I was like, oh.
Yeah, but do you even have a concept of what president means at that age?
I did. We all did in school.
It doesn't matter. It goes
at 6 years old, Greg. What concept did you have of president at the age of 6?
Picture was in our school. In schools, they had
you were at 6 years old. What concept of president did you have?
We were taught to respect him. They were like, "That's the president. He's great. We have his picture in your school."
But what did president mean to you at 6 years old?
I knew he was the big Chief Kahuna of
what?
Of the whole
the thing.
Do you even know what a country was at the age of 6?
Yeah, I got a basic concept. Like I live in America.
He was the boss of the grown-ups. Come on. That's what I
all the grown-ups.
All the grown-ups had a boss, and his picture was on the wall. And and I was like, okay. And then mom said that the boss was a crook. And then
I was 9 years old in the bicentennial. I totally knew about my country, and I loved the bicentennial.
All right, so 1976, who was president, Greg?
Well, Jimmy Carter became president in November, was elected, and then but
So who
I
was
do.
president in 1976, Greg?
Gerald Ford,
All right, thank you for answering the question.
Chevy Chase, duh.
Chevy
But-
Chase.
But it's like it was like I still had this concept of like, oh, I'm American. This
And
is a
who's
big
Gerald
thing.
Ford's vice president, Greg?
Spiro Agnew.
No,
Oh.
it was not Spiro Agnew.
I can't remember. Baby Rebozo.
I think
No.
it was Larry Flint.
I can't remember. I should know this. I forgot. Bob Dole.
Bob Dole. Jake, show me a Coke.
Mitch
Bob
McConnell.
No,
Mitch
John
McConnell.
Thurmond.
maybe. Definitely could have been him.
No,
I-
definitely
He would have
not.
been 80
I
already.
think that was Ulysses S. Grant's vice president. Was
No,
John
I'll
Thurmond.
give you a clue. His last name is part
Walter
of some of the.
Mondale.
No, his last name was part of the biggest conspiracy theories that
Rockefeller.
have. There you
Was
go.
it Nelson?
Yeah, it was Nelson
Yes!
Rockefeller.
I should know that. I forgot. I'm old. I'm
Right.
senile.
And how is it that Gerald Ford became Nixon's vice president?
He was
He was a good football player.
appointed somehow because he was the president of the Senate or something.
He was Speaker of the House.
Speaker of the House. That's right.
Yeah.
And he was part of the Warren Commission. You know that? Gerald Ford was one of the
Did
Warren
did
Commission
didn't
guys.
I
but
didn't
he
know
didn't get it wasn't like the proper number of like people are supposed to go through. Somehow it jumped from one place to another, I think, with him.
Well, technically, if the president and the vice president are gone, the Speaker of the House becomes president. It's like number
Was
3 in
it?
succession.
Is
Yeah.
that he's no okay? I thought
Well,
he
no,
was
the
like
vice president becomes
defense
president. Why didn't
secretary or
Spiro
something
Agnew-
else.
Did Spiro Agnew also?
Spiro
Is
Agnew
that
resigned before, around the time of the Watergate. I forget the exact sequence of events, but he resigned
Okay.
because of his own issues. He had his own scandals going on.
So it was like,
And that's why Agnew was gone. Because I used to, for the longest time, I'm like, oh, now why is Agnew gone? I had to finally look it up and go, okay, well, this is why. It was he had his own issues. One of those corrupt Marylanders that I'm connected to, but because I was born in Maryland as
I
well.
heard his wife was a drunk.
No, I think that was
Oh,
Betty.
how
That was Betty
saucy of her.
Ford,
No, I
who
heard
was
Spiro
the
Agnew's wife
addict.
was drunk too.
Could be. I mean, back in the day, alcoholism, it's
Everyone
kind of
was a drunk.
rampant. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Lyndon Johnson was supposed to have been a major one. Major drunk.
I read
US
That was his
rank.
rank. That was his actual rank was major drunk.
So, Matt, I'm
I-
curious. So, before, what was the first generation you told us? The people born in 1893, what were they called again?
The Lost Generation.
That was the lost generation. So
Yeah.
they came to age.
So they predated the Greatest
War.
Generation.
Yeah. So then, before that, though, would you say the Victorian, the Gilded Age? The
Well, if
Victorian-
you're really interested,
I
I've
am.
got a list of generations going back to the 1400s.
what? The
I've got the
downtrodden
name of
generation,
generation. I didn't even know
The
they
shit pot
existed.
generation.
I didn't even know they existed. But what we can do is we can make it a little bit of a game. We can go, I can give you like a time period and you can guess what the name of that generation is. Or you can give me a time period and I can tell you what the name of that generation is if you want. So what would you guys prefer? Would you rather I
Should we
gave
go
you
backwards in
the
time?
years?
Should we go
Let's
backwards, like,
let's
so?
try to guess it.
We
based
can
on the
only go
time frame.
backwards, Greg, because although they are starting to call the generation that's born in 2010 Generation Alpha. That's like a name that came out about 5 years ago.
Well, that's the
So-
latest. That's after Gen
That's
Z.
what they consider. They don't know if it's going to stick, but right now they're being called Generation Alpha, like essentially the first generation born into the newest decade of the millennium.
Never gonna stick. That is stupid as crap.
Well,
Yeah.
they give some reason behind it. I mean, it's in Wikipedia right now too, so they're giving it some credibility. But the
I'll
fact
edit
is
that right now.
it's the Australians. They're the ones who coined it. So
Oh,
it's
they're
their
the
fault.
worst. So there you
They are-
go.
The Australians are the worst. All right,
So
so
the
I'm
generation
gonna give you
like
I'm gonna give you a
something
time
over?
period. You can tell me what the name of that generation is called.
Yes.
So
Okay.
1742 to 1766. One of the famous people in that generation was Thomas Jefferson. What do you think the name of that generation was?
The enlightened generation.
The,
No.
The enlightenment
No,
people.
the patented generation.
no, Republican. That's the Republican generation, 1742 to 1766. But I'll give you another one, Greg, that you might get right. 1674 to 1700. What would you call that one? And that would be a famous person from that period was Cadwallader Colden or Mary Musgrove, neither of which I've ever heard of before.
They're,
That's
it's like
that's the sorcery generation.
No, I would say it's the peon generation where like 99% of people were like poor as fuck. And there was a few kings and lords.
Well, that was the Enlightenment generation, Greg. 1674 to
was.
1700. Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of sorcery.
And I kind of like the name of the generation before that, which is 1648 to 1673, which is the Glorious Generation.
Why were they glorious?
Because that was during the time of the Glorious Revolution.
Wait, in England.
Yes, this goes back because we're kind of out of the United States if we're in the 1600s.
What are you talking about, Cromwell? Is that the Cromwell thing?
I don't know. I'd have to click on the link to find out. So,
Cromwell
all right, so
much more recent.
the colonial glorious revolution began with civil upheavals and catastrophic Indian wars, soon followed by parliamentary efforts to reassert direct royal control over the colonies. The ensuing resistance culminated in 1689 with colonial rebellions that were triggered by news of the glorious revolution in England on behalf of William of Orange. A further decade of war against Canadian New France ended with Britain's global triumph, vigorous institutions of colonial self-rule, and a new era of peace with local native tribes.
I have a feeling
Puritans entered elderhood, Cavaliers entered midlife, Glorious entered young adulthood, and the Enlighteners entered childhood at that time. So
I want to understand.
We're turning into a history lesson today.
I want to understand more about how an institution can be vigorous.
A vigorous institution?
Mm-hmm.
Guess it depends on how much you shake your stick at it.
Why? That's what I'm like. What?
Well, you could say like the New Deal. That was a pretty vigorous.
Was it?
I guess it would be like when something is coming into power, it's shaky, and then it gets established and is like changing the minds of the masses. That's where the vigor comes in of that particular institution, whatever that institution is.
Like Newt Gingrich and the contract with America.
Well, that wasn't really an institution. That was just more of a concept.
Yeah, but it
was a vigorous.
An institution would be like the justice system. That'd be an institution. You know.
Don't you think Newt Gingrich was trying to start this institution?
I think that institutions generally should not be vigorous. I think the world is a better place without vigorous, shaky, coming into power institutions. As a rule.
It's always going to happen. There's always going to be people with new ideas creating new systems that come into place, and they'll either have some vigor to them or they won't. Like the internet was a vigorous institution, and now it's kind of settled into what it is now. You know,
still pretty vigorous. It's just omnipresent.
You know, it's not dead. That's true. It's not a dead institution.
Not dead at all. It's the exact opposite.
Now it's insidious. This is the insidious generation.
Yeah. It's an insidious institution.
All right. So what do you think the generation from 1822 to 1842 was called?
The Davy Crockett generation.
No, but
the frontiers.
It's close. One of the famous people, Ulysses S. Grant and Louisa May Alcott, were part of that particular generation.
They're kind of disparate.
1822 to 1842.
So a drunken general and a writer, an author, a woman author.
Well, he wasn't drunk when he was born.
I don't know.
It was the.
He was a member of that generation. He didn't define that generation.
The Bing-a-Boom generation.
It was the Gilded Age, the Gilded Generation.
That's the Gilded Age. I thought that was later, like the late 1800s. After.
Well, no, that's the Gilded Generation, not necessarily the Gilded Age. Gilded Age is probably some other year.
I thought that was like after industrialization had, taken over, like
here we
factories.
Go.
And
I wouldn't know.
We're
all trying to work our memories here, and I think we're not doing a good job.
Is the bean a seed? No, it's a legume.
It's a fruit.
But that makes it a fruit because legumes are fruits.
It's the fruit generation.
Cashews are not nuts. I don't know. Okay.
Do they have their own generation? Nuts? Were there generations of nuts and fruits?
Yeah.
I think we're currently in the nut generation at this
moment.
Remember
the California raisins? That was kind of a fruity generation.
All right, so let's go back to the very first generation we have a name for, which is 1433 to 1460.
That's the beat 'em with a stick generation.
So King King Henry VII and Elizabeth Woodville were part of that generation, and one era that came into those members of that generation came into age to was the War of the Roses. But what generation do you think that would be called? 1433 to 1460.
Oh, it's
The
generation.
The mud generation.
The mud generation.
Mud.
So were they eating mud back then? Is that the idea?
Probably, if they were lucky. Wasn't it like back then, like 95% of people were just fucking starving and just nothing. And then there was royalty and a few lords.
Yes, there definitely royalty and lords existing in that age.
The Fox generation.
It was the Arthurian generation.
Oh,
They
really?
look back to King Arthur.
Yes. They grew up during England's demoralizing retreat from France, an era of rising pessimism and civil disorder. And they were raised amid hopes that they might save the kingdom. The Arthurians came of age with a civil war that did not end until Henry Tudor established his new monarchy. When they entered midlife, they closed ranks around a manly new era of prosperity, which was led by wool exports, social discipline, which is led by busy local magistrates, and a strong central government led by the new Star Chamber. And when they entered old age, they enclosed fields, printed books, and planned voyages to the New World, securing a reputation for chivalric teamwork immortalized in Le Morte d'Arthur. I was wondering where Arthur came into this. Their generation's treasured epic. So that's how it comes in. So it's because of Mallory's book of the death of King Arthur. That's why they're called Arthurian. I was wondering about that. So, all right. So that was the first known generation anyway.
How are our listeners on TikTok and YouTube doing at this point?
Oh, we don't have any in either place, in either YouTube or TikTok at the moment.
Does Anchor tell you how many people are listening to us?
No, because we're not on Anchor yet. We're not live on Anchor. Anchor gets published later whenever I finally get around to publishing the
I know this.
the podcast. Well, I'm glad you know that, Greg. I'm glad I can help you with that. What?
I know it deep down under a gallon of bourbon.
Okay, well, with that gallon of bourbon in mind, we're going to start our Waspy Soda Pop segment. It's the perfect time for that.
I don't have to pee yet. Why are you starting it?
Too bad.
Very sorry that you don't have to pee, Greg.
Too late.
Bourbon in mind, we're going to start our Waspy Soda Pop segment. If it actually plays. It's the perfect time for that.
I don't have to pee yet. Why are you starting?
I'm getting no sound from it at all. Are you guys hearing anything?
Bourbon
in mind, we're going to start our Waspy Soda Pop segment. If it actually plays. Perfect time for that.
Perfect time for that.
Number 9.
You guys hearing anything? Wait, we're gonna start. I'm serious. So can you guys hear the sound at all? Perfect time for that.
We can hear us talking. Number 9.
Right, but you couldn't hear the sound of the. Wait. I'm serious. Could you even see the video at all? Perfect time for that. What is happening?
I
couldn't hear the sound of the what's going on.
Number 9?
You're hearing number 9?
No, I said that and I kept repeating it. Everything we said was repeated.
Oh my God.
This is so strange.
You couldn't hear that, Matt?
You couldn't hear any of that?
I couldn't hear any looping.
It was
of any kind.
What we just said 30 seconds ago. And then it kept repeating it, so it kept adding. Everything
and then it kept adding, so the more you said, the more it would layer the sound on top of it.
That is so strange.
It was kind of
on
cool,
ourselves. It was
I don't know what's going on here. All right, I'm gonna change something here.
Oh, that was the best.
That was good.
I don't know why. I don't know why these things
that was
are
the best
happening.
Waspy Soda Pop ever.
Right.
I was like, if Matt intended this is absolute genius.
No, I don't know what you guys were hearing at all. So that's so strange.
That's weird.
Well, it'll be on YouTube, I'm sure.
Maybe it will be. I mean, because if you guys aren't getting any of the sound, I don't know what you guys were hearing at all. So that's so strange.
Well,
so you're getting the same
YouTube,
looping thing
I'm
now
sure.
too, right? Maybe it.
I don't know.
Yeah, because
Hold
on
on.
YouTube, I'm trying to see.
There's
I'm
nothing
seeing
now.
the video.
I'm
on
not seeing
YouTube.
anything.
It's
God.
actually a weird striated screen. Like it's got lines on my.
It says that it's paused. YouTube
Looks like
I'm
it's
trying to
focused
see.
in on
There's
some
nothing in
the
somebody's
video.
jeans. I'm not seeing anything.
I see the Safe Mart
Safe Mart.
logo now. Oh,
No,
it went away.
jeans.
Wait, why is it doing this? So it stops sharing whenever.
It is completely unprofessional. I don't like this.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. This is you know what? I'm just gonna run. We'll just talk over it.
Wait, I think I can hear it.
You can hear it?
Yeah,
I can't hear anything. I don't hear anything.
The song's starting now, but it's quiet.
Yeah.
Soda pop.
Hey there, everybody. This is
I don't hear
Soda
anything.
Pop with a great new recipe that you and your family
all.
are going to bond over. You are going to love this.
It's so
We got pork karate chops with mushroom cream sauce.
All right, well, at least
Here
we can
are
do
your
like a.
ingredients. First,
We can
four
talk over.
bone-in
You can
pork chops, 1.5
ask
inch
what it's
thick,
all about
and
if you
one
want.
karate
Pork-
key.
I can hear it,
Size,
Matt.
Karate
with the
chops.
appropriate belt. Depends upon your skill.
I can
You can hear
2
Waspy
tablespoons
Soda Pop
olive oil,
talking?
1 teaspoon of
It's
salt,
pork karate
freshly ground
chops.
pepper,
Pork
6
karate chops.
tablespoons of butter,
Spoon of butter.
2 pounds
2
of criminy
pounds
mushrooms.
crimini
Criminy, get
mushrooms.
those tough ends removed and cut them in half.
Ooh,
3
yeah.
garlic
I'm not
cloves
hearing
mixed,
anything.
1 cup
I'm
of
just getting the
dry white
video.
wine, because if you have wet white wine, it's going to be
Wet
a
white
problem.
wine is
1 cup of
bad.
heavy cream, 1 tablespoon of
cream?
Dijon mustard, 2 tablespoons
Dijon
of
mustard?
fresh thyme, minced, 1 lemon, 2 tablespoons of fresh
lemon?
chives. Yes. All right.
Okay.
Now,
So I can hear it.
instructions.
Huh.
First, remove
Wonder
your
why I
clothing
can't hear
and
anything.
adorn yourself with the karate
Whoa,
gi.
what's happening now?
Strike a
Whoa.
fighting pose. Using swift motions, pat the pork dry with
All
a
I know
paper
is that I
towel.
need to somehow
Sometimes a knife
put in our
hand strike,
commentary
also
over it
known as
whenever
a
I
chop,
put the
is
actual
useful for the
video
drying
in like I normally
process.
do,
And salt
so
and
that we can
generously
have
pepper them.
your
The pork,
comments
not your
as
chops.
we're doing
Anyway,
this.
spin a large,
Added.
heavy bottom skillet
God, I
3
hope
times
you,
in the
I
air,
hope
then
you could
abruptly place it
capture
on the stove.
what was happening
Heat
because
oil in the pan over high heat until you see wisps of
it would
smoke.
loop,
Grab the chops
and
with both
then
hands
Greg and I
and
would say
strike them into
additional
the
stuff,
pan.
and that would get
Brown
added to the
without
loop.
flipping for 3 minutes.
So it was
Then
like
flip and
3 or 4
continue cooking
loops
for
in
another
that Greg
3
started
minutes.
going
Continue
number
flipping
9,
back
and then
and
that
forth
started
until the
looping
internal
in, and I was
temperature
like,
reads about
oh my
160
God, I can't
degrees
even
Fahrenheit.
take it anymore.
Continue this process
I'm
with
like,
the
I was
remaining
just trying to
pork
figure out
chops
where the
set
number
aside.
9 was coming
You
in.
may do an actual flip at this time.
But Greg's not even
Quickly,
talking, so I don't know
reduce
what's
the heat
going
to
on with
medium
Greg
and add
right
butter
now.
to the pan.
He
Number
finally
9
had
is
to-
from the
Mushrooms
Beatles
and
song,
stir until
Revolution
cooked for
number
about
9,
5
Yoko
minutes
Ono.
with a
She just
loud yell.
repeats number
Yeah!
9.
Throw in garlic and
Number
cook for
9?
1 more minute. Carefully
It's on the White
pour
Album.
the dry wine
It's on the
along
White
with
Album.
fresh thyme into
God,
the
I
pan.
put so much work
When
into this,
simmer,
or Waspy put
allow
in
the
so much
mushroom
work
mixture to
into this
simmer
video.
until wine
It's
is
sad that
reduced
it can't
by
be
half.
heard.
Add in the
I
heavy
can-
cream and mustard. Stir briskly until all ingredients are combined. Adjust
You
the
can what?
seasoning with salt and pepper.
I
Add
can
the
hear it.
pork
It's
chops
really
to the
quiet.
pan, spoon in the sauce over them.
It's so
And use
strange.
a karate
Why-
chop you
I
love
can hear it
yeah,
too.
and
Anything.
add
I can't hear
freshly
anything
squeezed
at
lemon
all.
juice and fresh chives to your dish. Serve it warm with plenty of
is
sauce
so
and
weird.
mushrooms. Now this is
So there was
awesome.
sauce
isn't
and
it?
mushrooms.
Those are pork karate chops with mushroom
I
cream
don't
sauce.
get it.
This is
I don't
Waspy
know why
Soda
that
Pop.
happened.
Food is free.
It does sound pretty good, though.
At Safe Mart, it's a Safe Mart. Come to Safe Mart and be safe.
SafeMart is a proud sponsor of Food is for Eating with Waspy Soda Pop. Today's special, fried tarantula. Only 10 for $10. Come get some. SafeMart. Be safe.
Food is for eating. Food is for eating. Food is for eating with Waspy Soda Pop.
Hey there, everybody. This is Waspy Soda Pop with a great new recipe that you and your family are going to bond over. You are going to love this. We got pork karate chops with mushroom cream sauce. Here are your ingredients. First, get 4 bone-in pork chops, 1.5 inch thick, then 1 karate gi. Get the right size with the appropriate belt. Depends upon your skill level. 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 1 teaspoon of salt, freshly ground pepper, 6 tablespoons of butter, 2 pounds of criminy mushrooms. Criminy? Get those tough ends removed and cut them in half. 3 garlic cloves minced, 1 cup of dry white wine, because if you have wet white wine, it's going to be a problem. 1 cup of heavy cream, 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard, 2 tablespoons of fresh thyme, minced, 1 lemon, 2 tablespoons of fresh chives. Yes. All right. Now, here are your instructions. First, remove your clothing and adorn yourself with the karate gi and strike a fighting pose. Using swift motions, pat the pork dry with a paper towel. Sometimes a knife hand strike, also known as a chop, is useful for the drying process. And salt and generously pepper them, the pork, not your chops. Anyway, spin a large, heavy bottom skillet 3 times in the air, then abruptly place it on the stove. Heat oil in the pan over high heat until you see wisps of smoke. Grab the chops with both hands and strike them into the pan. Brown without flipping for 3 minutes. Then flip and continue cooking for another 3 minutes. Continue flipping back and forth until the internal temperature reads about 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Continue this process with the remaining pork chops and set aside. You may do an actual flip at this time if you choose. Now quickly reduce the heat to medium and add butter to the pan. Once melted, add the mushrooms and stir until cooked through about 5 minutes. With a loud yell, "Yeah!" Throw in garlic and cook for 1 more minute. Carefully pour the dry wine along with the fresh thyme into the pan. Bring to a simmer. Allow the mushroom mixture to simmer until wine is reduced by half. Add in the heavy cream and mustard. Stir briskly until all ingredients are combined. Adjust the seasoning with salt and pepper. Add your pork chops to the pan. Spoon in the sauce over them. And use a karate chop to your lemon. Yeah! And add freshly squeezed lemon juice and fresh chives to your dish. Serve it warm with plenty of sauce and mushrooms. Now, this is awesome, isn't it? So those are pork karate chops with mushroom cream sauce. This is Waspy Soda Pop. Food is for eating.
Why are there monkeys or lemurs?
Well,
one's a
those have
monkey.
been part of the Waspy Soda Pop production for a few weeks now.
What?
Yeah.
How come I
Yeah.
didn't notice them?
Well, Greg, that's a good question.
I think
Why
you
haven't
kinda-
you noticed them?
I think you
Come, I'm
gotta
a
check out.
55-year-old dishwasher.
Oh, let's not
Why
get all-
haven't you noticed? All right, well, there is Waspy Soda Pop's production
I
for
think
the
we
week.
should try to show it at the end. Maybe in half an hour it'll work.
No, if it's not working now, it's not going to work later. I mean, I tried it a couple different ways just now, and that's just
No.
sad.
I'd
Can
love
we
to
somehow
filled with
replicate
sadness.
that looping thing again?
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to
I
be
just
part of
really
the
like the
recording or
video
not. I don't
clip
think it
of
will
that.
be.
I really like the video clip of that cute chubby guy just playing with his pan. That was a great clip.
Shoot, chubby guy playing with what?
He's just like holding his pan. It's like for some reason in the middle of the recipe, this like very cute chubby guy just going with his pan.
Oh, right.
With his pan?
He had the pan. He had the
cute
skillet.
chubby guy.
He wasn't doing
Yeah.
that. He was just
Well,
kinda-
that's what you just did.
No, it's this way.
You know, but I'd say that
Okay,
Safe
that's
Mart had
cool.
a good product. I mean, 10 tarantulas for $10. That's a pretty good deal.
That's good. Do they take the hairs out?
Well,
Is
it's
it like-
fried tarantulas, so they're probably burned off in the frying
Oh.
process.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Are they locally sourced? The
I think I don't know where they got them from.
Oh my God, guys, at my super woke place today, I saw a t-shirt, climb locally. Like, if you're going to climb a mountain, don't go to the Himalayas. Do it locally, for God's sake.
Do it in your house. Climb the
Yes.
mountain in your home.
If there's a mountain within 10 blocks of you, you can climb it, but don't fucking-
Technically, if you're climbing anywhere, you'd be climbing local to where you are at that point in time.
This is true, but they're also saying you shouldn't go to climb in Montana. You should climb a mountain in Portland, for God's sakes.
What am I going to do
Or
in
no, Oregon.
Florida? What the fuck am I going to climb? A palm tree?
You're gonna climb a crocodile,
Climb
alligator.
a big high rise on the beach in
Climb a
Miami?
Walmart.
Yeah, you could climb a big high rise on the beach. That'd be a thing.
Like King Kong, just
Yeah, except you'd be Prince Kong,
Like that
Tiny Kong.
video game Rampage, and you could just reach in and grab people and go, oh.
Did you call it Rampage?
Wasn't that Rampage?
Rampage.
What do you say, Rampage? Fancy pants?
It's a
French?
rampage, Greg.
Oh, I guess. Yeah, Rampage.
Rampage.
Oh, yeah, Rampage. That's what I said. But I love the way that
It's always fun when you mispronounce things.
I love the way the monsters would just reach in the window and grab a screaming woman and go, "Grr," and eat him down.
I remember there were
Remember that
these
game?
guys. There was this radio broadcast I used to listen to back in the day where they wouldn't say Batman; they'd call him Batman.
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 Like in cricket. Is that in
Batman.
cricket? The Batman.
It's Batman and Robin.
Yeah, I talked to somebody it's like the last few months that talked about robots. I'm like,
Yeah,
what?
you know what? Robot is the way it used to be pronounced. It used to be
Robot.
pronounced robot.
Like
Yeah.
Frost.
Like when the concept first came out, people were pronouncing that way, and somewhere along the line, people changed it to robot. But they were
No.
robots.
No, they're not robots. Anyway,
A robot
read
is a
the-
fruit.
I read
no,
the
it's a
first book.
legume.
that surmised robots, RUR. It was like 1910. It was this, I think he's like some Czech writer or something. I can't remember his name. But it was about like the first robot concept in science fiction came out then.
Oh.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, the
I
second
win.
concept will be right now
Let's
with
not
haven't
your
you
segment.
noticed? All
Here
right.
we go.
Well,
He has
there
an
is
opinion,
I still
may
can't
not
hear
always
anything.
be right.
Production.
I
He's
should
a
try to show it
lawyer.
maybe
He's
in
old
half
and
an
he's
hour.
white.
No,
I'm hearing
if
my
it's not
voice
working now, it's
looping.
not going to work later. I mean,
What?
I tried it a couple different ways just now, and that's just sad.
Ask
I
What?
Greg.
think,
Filled with sad when this is happening.
Looping thing.
You guys, I'm
Hey.
hearing
Yeah, I don't know
my
if
voice
that's
from a
going to
minute
be
ago.
part of the recording or not. From a minute ago.
Yeah, it did the loop thing again. It was repeating what I said
Yeah.
just then.
Yeah, I'm not hearing that at all. I'm
So
not getting
weird.
any sound from my computer.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if I play it without it being as part of the sharing thing,
I could hear
if
the
it'll
song
be the
though.
same thing.
Hear the song under it, with my talking.
I don't know. That's so strange. Yeah, I'm not hearing any sound in my headphones. I can hear you
If
guys
when
in
you-
my headphones.
If when you publish this episode, the whole thing is just a weird loop, you gotta publish it, and it'll just be like the LSD episode of Quibble Squabble.
I don't know why it would. I mean, because this records onto my computer, so I don't know that it would do that. But I'm just
Yeah.
glad that we didn't have a guest on while I had this
Yeah.
mess happening. That's probably fortuitous. All right. Well, it's time to ask Greg a legal question.
He has an opinion, may not always be right. He's a real fake lawyer. He's old and he's white. Ask him a question, 'cause he's a good egg for bogus advice. Ask Greg. Ask Greg. Ask Greg.
Brendan, do we have anybody from our swath of listeners across the world who has a legal question for Greg?
Swath.
Yes.
Yeah, I do. Unfortunately,
This is excellent news, actually.
It's a little aggressive, Greg. So I mean, I don't know what this person's original question was, but they seem a little upset with you. So
Uh-oh.
here we go.
Yes.
Dear Greg, if that's your fucking name, you piece of shit. All the legal advice you've been given on this show is complete crap. I've tried to follow several of the things. It made no sense. I don't even think you know what habeas corpus means. I dare you to explain to me what habeas corpus means. Fuck
Signed.
you, Steve.
Steve's got a very large piece of anger for you, Greg.
Habeas corpus. It's just like the way people pronounce different things. It could mean different things at different times. Sometimes it means a corpse, a body that's full of habeas, which is a herb.
Okay.
And then
It's-
some,
Habeas is an herb.
yeah, habeas. You never put habeas
It
on your
was
like
very
muesli?
popular during the Gilded generation.
Good for
Yes.
creating a poultices.
Yes. Oh, it's a really good poultice maker. But I really can't refute what this person's accusing me of. I am a fake lawyer. I'm just trying to help people with whatever knowledge I do have of the law, which is from watching Aaron Brockovich and LA Law and some other shows. So I'm doing my best. I'm trying to help people, and I'm sorry if I didn't help you. I could help you with my homespun legal advice, if you will, my DIY legal advice. I think I have helped many people. I've got letters. I've got reams of letters of people I've helped over the past year with my maybe not traditional legal advice, but I've still given enough wisdom to people where they've been helped in their situation. So I hope you at least take that into consideration. And and fuck you in conclusion.
But
Could you grab one of those letters and read it to us right now?
Now they're in my files.
But bottom line is,
Okay.
habeas corpus means a dead body full of habeas, which is an herb.
Herb.
Yeah.
That they make
Sometimes.
poultices with.
It depends on the trial. It could mean other things.
What can it mean?
Sometimes
what kind of trial determines the other definition?
Sometimes it means let's take a break for lunch. That's another Latin interpretation of that. Like the judge says, habeas corpus, hits the gavel, everyone goes to have
Could
lunch.
also mean let's go to lunch. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Depends. It's context. It's all context.
I sent it off to Steve. Hopefully,
Yeah.
he'll be fine.
Well,
And still,
Steve should be
fuck him.
listening to get his answers. That's the
Fuck
thing.
Steve.
Well, it's sad. It's sad to hear you guys say bad things about our listeners, but I guess if he's a little cranky, we don't need him as a listener after all.
He's a
Especially
little
if he's
too
like
critical.
he's a little very aggressive towards Greg, and I don't think Greg necessarily
it came
deserves
in
that
from-
much.
Yeah.
It came in from a prison email, so he's obviously behind bars at this point.
Usually the prison emails we get though are asking for pictures of me with my shirt off, like lower than I usually show.
I've
Usually they're very
supplied
nice.
I've supplied all of those as you've requested.
Yeah, they're very flattering, the prison emails we get from men in
We have
prison.
the Google shared drive of all of your pictures on it, and I just sent a link.
Yeah, I do believe that Greg's photo is in prisons across this country, up on up on the walls.
This was like my naked chest from here up, and they're like, oh,
Right.
God, I wish
They're like, those are some shoulders.
if
We
it
like
could only
those
be
shoulders.
lower.
It's been well known that you are haunted by the screams of men in prison, Greg. Yes.
Well, male prisoners don't see any titties at all. So my male titties would probably be they'd still be like, oh, it's still tits.
Would they
Yum.
make that noise?
Mm.
Rawr.
Arr.
That's the noise we would make. All right, well, let's get back to our client. Dealing with our client still, which is Generation Whatevrer. So I think in general, looking at all these different, I'm just going to read them all off. We're going to read them all off in order, going all the way to now, and we'll do it really fast. And then if you have any questions about any of them, we may or may not deal with it. So Arthurian, Humanist, Reformation, Reprisal, Elizabethan, Parliamentary, Puritan, Cavalier, Glorious, Enlightenment, Awakening, Liberty, Republican, Compromise, Transcendental, Gilded, Progressive, Missionary, Lost, GI or Greatest, Silent, Baby Boom, Generation X, Millennial, then Gen Z, and then potentially Generation
Gen Alpha.
Alpha. Right.
Maybe.
I think I have two.
Okay.
One is transcendental.
That was during the time. That's when Abraham Lincoln was born during Transcendental, and Elizabeth.
Is this
Cady
like when the
Stanton.
Mormons and the Seventh-day Adventists started? All those weird churches were starting.
They came of age during the Transcendental Awakening. So that began with Charles Finney's evangelicalism and Denmark Vesey's slave revolt. Soon merging with Jacksonian populism, like Andrew Jackson, it peaked in 1831 with Nat Turner's rebellion, the founding of shrill abolitionist societies, and the rise of splinter political parties, after spawning a flood tide of, quote, romantic idealism, unquote, including feminism and new prophetic religions, food fads, and utopian communes. The mood gentrified in the early 1840s into a credo of self-help, moral uplift, and manifest destiny. So I think, Greg,
That's
you're
when
right.
the Mormons started in the Seventh-day
Yeah.
Adventists. And
Wow, that was kind of a big deal. Now, okay, so my next one, because I watched Greg trigger on it, was
So Transcendental is 1792 to 1821.
a pretty good one. So then the next one was again missionary.
Missionary.
Mhm.
So that, of course, would be the sexual
they were
awakening.
vanilla.
That was
Just vanilla.
Franklin Roosevelt and Emma Goldman were born during that period of 1860 to 1882, and it's characterized by the Third Great Awakening, which began with the Haymarket Riot and the student missionary movement. It rose with agrarian protest and labor violence, and climaxed in Bryan's revivalist candidacy. Gilded Age realism came under harsh attack from trust-blasting muckrakers, Billy Sunday evangelicals, New Woman feminists, and Chautauqua dreamers. After radicalizing and splitting the progressive movement, the passion cooled when William Howard Taft succeeded Teddy Roosevelt in the White House.
Chautauqua.
Wow, when you think about that, like all that insanity back then,
Yes.
and you look at it from now, you go,
Right. It's
right?
like that ain't nothing compared to what we got going on. But yeah, there was a lot of radicalism happening in that
Oh
period.
God, there was some
Yeah.
crazy stuff. Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, come on.
He was
So
like
that
a good
was-
Trump.
So that was the
Yeah,
missionary
kinda.
period, the missionary generations. That was just before the lost generation.
I thought it was interesting that the previous generation, the guy who describes it says shrill abolitionist, like, oh, just simmer down with your hatred of slavery. Stop being so shrill about it.
Well, but this was a period though that slavery had ended. 1860 to 1882, right?
Yeah, but because of those shrill abolitionists being shrill about it, saying it's gotta fucking end. We'll go to war for it. We'll have a war of succession. You know?
There were probably some who were less shrill than others.
I'm sure there were, but no matter how shrill you were, I thumbs up to those. Even if they were annoying.
It's kind of interesting to think about how Franklin Roosevelt was born in the time of slavery, though. You know, when I think of him as a more modern, even though he was in the, well, I guess not so modern, it's like almost 100 years, 80 years ago now, Franklin Roosevelt was president. But
it is weird.
So when he was born, slavery was still a thing?
Yes.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was the missionary generation was when slavery,
the
Emancipation Proclamation took
He became president 32, so God, he was 60? No, 72 when he became president.
Yeah. I don't know if he was that old when he became president.
Well, it was 1860 you said he was born?
I don't know that he was born in the beginning of that generation.
Oh, okay.
It was during that generation is when slavery ended.
Yeah, I don't think he was 72. He wasn't that old.
Yeah, so slavery, I don't remember when it ended, but it ended sometime in the 60s, 1860s.
1865, Matt. You should know that. The end of the Civil War.
That was the end of the Civil War. That's not when slavery was ended, though, by
yes,
proclamation.
It was.
The proclamation was before the end of the Civil War.
It was 1862, but it didn't end it in the South. The South were like, fuck that proclamation. We're not the...
Right, but legally...
In the United States, yes, you're right.
Yes.
Not in the Confederacy, which was half the country, but yeah. The United States, it was ended. 3 years
I don't know that it was half the country, but it was a large portion. Anyway, regardless of that nitpicking, that quibbling...
It's not really nitpicking. This is important historical stuff.
I was interested in the reprisal generation, which was 1512 to 1540, and then the famous members of that generation were Francis Drake and Queen Elizabeth I. And the era of that was intolerance and martyrdom. So it was an era of social fragmentation, civil rebellion, and deadly political intrigue. Through the reigns of Edward VI and Queen Mary, the throne tacked violently over the issue of religion. The economy careened in a boom-bust cycle with royal debasements fueling unprecedented inflation. When the era closed early in the reign of Queen Elizabeth, a disillusioned nation looked anxiously at the future. So,
is this like during the Inquisition time?
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
The
Inquisition? No one ever expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Do that.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
You dork. You mentioned the economic like booms and busts. But it was that during the Dutch tulip thing. Like, remember that whole thing? That was a huge thing. Like the speculation on tulips, and it was the first time where people were like, "Wow, capitalism can go nuts, can go crazy."
The grand tulip speculation. Like, tulip? Is it a tulip or is it a shoehorn? I can't tell the difference. But my speculation is...
People were paying $200 for a tulip.
I'm wearing my wooden shoes.
It was almost like, well, I don't know if this is...
Wait a minute. I mean, the Dutch, how much economic impact can the Dutch have?
They were pretty strong then. The Dutch East India Trading Company, they ran the world's economy. They were
the Dutch were pretty powerful back in the day.
But they were propped up.
When everybody was kind of equal.
They were propped up by
the
tulips.
Illuminati.
By their tulip wealth. Their tulip wealth.
I think this is before the Illuminati.
No, this is the lizards. They've been here forever. They've been here since the
lizards. The lizards were the pharaohs, is what you're saying.
Right. And all hail her mother who recently passed, the queen of all lizards here on
Earth. This is actually the perfect time, Greg, for us to end with this client and let it become the last word. Because Brendan, he's got a whole lizard thing going on here, so we should...
I didn't know it. No.
And he needs to talk about Queen Elizabeth.
A little bit. And her generation. Roosevelt was president. But, so let's do this.
It is weird.
So when he was born, slavery was still a thing?
I don't know.
What?
Is it happening?
This
Here we
is
go.
the last word.
Missionary
Brendan
Missionary? What?
Masturbation
Slavery.
provocation. Oh, salad.
In prison, 32.
Greg, are you hearing this, or is it just me?
60? Is it looping again?
Yeah, it was.
So it was looping for Brendan, but not for Greg.
I just think
Well,
Greg
I can't tell.
I'm going to
because
have
the-
to spend some time on the computer this
Because
coming
your
week
intro
to
for
figure this
Brendan's
shit
last
out.
word sounds like it's looping. So it's hard to tell. We're like, zip, zip,
Vert-
loop.
Zoop,
Sure.
verp, bloop, bloop. One of these days, I'll give Brendan like a new background noise, but I'm
Sounds
kind
like
of,
a goddamn Donald Trump speech.
it
for
becomes
God's
its
sakes.
own. It becomes its own
Bada bing,
conversation.
bada boom, bada bing, bada bing,
no,
boom.
not again.
All I know is that I was thinking totally about Biden in the last era. We were the reprisal generation. I was thinking like, oh, this is Biden's time with the massive inflation and debasements. Anyway, it's the last word with Brendan Haggerty. Let's hear it.
This is the last word with Brendan Haggerty. Oh, salad. Sip.
So, we've talked a lot about the different generations going all the way back to, missionary and the gilded and whatever else we talked about. But the real truth is we're all just people just trying to figure out ourselves along in this world. And old people basically suck and young people are the worst. And they've always been that way all the way back to Christopher Columbus and his kids who were all rotten, entitled kids and whatever it was, it's just the kind of same repeating pattern. We just keep inventing names on it based upon what major corporations are trying to sell you because, so let's sell everybody an iPhone and we'll call them the iPhone generation. I don't know. Anyway, you're all going to grow old and die at some point. So hug somebody, okay? Maybe not a stranger, but somebody you know. Thanks.
That's a downer. Last word.
Well, the thing is that there was recent news about a woman who had a hugging business here in Portland, Oregon, whose business has now just ended. She just wasn't able to make it sustainable
Who's the biggest customer?
after 9 years. She had a cuddling business.
Oh,
And speaking of which, somebody on TikTok said, "Marry me, Uncle Docs." I don't know what that means, but
I think I
dox-
know.
isn't doxing a thing where
That's
you
my
give out
stage
people's
name.
phone numbers?
No, docking is when two gay
Not
guys.
docking, doxing with an X.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think it's when you're giving out people's phone numbers and their addresses to the general public across the internet. I think that's what
I think
doxing
gerbils
is.
are involved, maybe.
no.
Oh,
gerbils.
it was only a matter of time before Greg brought up the gerbils. Anyway, well, our client today has been Generation Whatever. As far as
Whatever.
I'm concerned, there are patterns of behavior that happen within periods of time because people are the product of their environment to a large degree. And so those patterns will wind up being part of whatever. But as far as I'm concerned, all the generation stuff is nonsense, nonsense, nonsense. Because we go back to the beginning of humanity, there were no generations. It was just generation now. And it's always generation now.
It was
That's all it
generation
shall ever
eat
be.
and
Is
don't
generation now, right?
That's what
Don't-
the first
Don't get
100
eaten.
generations.
Eat and don't get eaten. That's the
Yeah.
main generation for all time. All right. Well, this has been the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. I'm Matt. That's Brendan. There's Greg. And, we're three old people who are telling you things that we can barely remember
Generation
or know,
X. Old
or know what to
people.
do with.
Your consultation with the law offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker has ended. You may pay your retainer at www.qsblaw.org. Please exit to the right of the water cooler and grab a candy from the front desk. We hope to see you again soon, but you need to leave now. I said leave. Why don't they listen? Get out! Get out!